October 29, 1929, was known as Black Tuesday on Wall Street. At first, those in the Midwest thought it was an East Coast problem, but it soon hovered over Hutchinson, Kansas. Although the education wing was dedicated in 1929, the Depression stopped its completion until 1937. There would be no more building at Trinity until 1960. The dark cloud of Wall Street soon turned to the dark cloud of dust. Hutchinson was spared the worst of the Dust Bowl, but dust storms reached as far east as Pratt and Great Bend. Just as the giant dust clouds became fewer in the 1930s, war clouds were gathering in Europe. In the Pacific, the attack on Pearl Harbor mobilized the United States. 157 members and future members served in the armed forces. The baby boom would begin in the mid-1940s, and young families with children would be the dominant influence in Trinity for the next 20 years. We had 60 kindergarten children in one room, babies slept in stacked cribs in a very small classroom, adults were crowded next to the boiler room, toddlers met in the kitchen. In the 1950s, it was obvious that a new addition to Trinity was needed. The church was bursting at the seams, and so the church authorized the building committee to be formed.
In 1957, a preliminary committee was established to explore the expansion of the church to the east. 20 people were named to the committee. Among them, its chairman, Ralph Thorne, the teacher of the then largest adult education class, the committee's secretary, Mary Eleanor Smith Hill, a 33-year-old mother of two, and Esther Dewater, an active member in the church and leader of its kitchen operations.
The architects estimated the project at $355,000. In October of 1958, the project was approved at $369,000. Here, Ralph Thorne was given the honor of breaking the ground first in April of 1960, and the opening services were 1 year later in April of 1961.
In the name of God, and in the presence of this congregation, I now declare Trinity's third edition to be open for religious nurture, Christian education and training, and the service of mankind. May it be a house of study, of fellowship, and of prayer for all people.
In the late 1970s and early 1980s, various improvements were made to the church. The sanctuary was remodeled and a new pipe organ was installed.
In the late 1990s, Reverend Nick Warner saw the promise of a praise service and the need for a facility to provide that service. In 2000, the church adopted the proposal to build a place for such a service. The almost $2 million project began in the fall of 2001 and was completed the next year. The first worship service was held October 13, 2002. When construction began, Reverend Nick Warner said,
"We are not only gathered to consecrate this area and to envision the future, but to give thanks for the past. This space had held 32 parked cars and a basketball court in the playground. About a year from now, if all goes according to plan, many things will be happening in this area. People will be attending services of contemporary praise and worship. Youth will be enjoying an expanded area in the basement. People will be preparing food. Children will be using a wonderful indoor area after school. Large groups will gather for meals and programs together. People will gather for classes."
All of this hope and promise has come to fruition. The only setback was the flood of 2019. The damage done to the Warner Wing basement and the heartache the flood created have been repaired, and the Warner Wing continues to fulfill its promise of 2001.